Something amazing happened to America in 1957. It was a small satellite about the size of a beach ball. It weighed 184 pounds, and it was shot into outer space into orbit around the Earth. It was traveling 18,000 miles per hour, which means it took about 96 minutes to go around the Earth one time, and it stayed out there for 3 months. America was awestruck by this. The only problem was we didn't launch it. The Russians did. This is Sputnik, okay? We were in a race to get into space, and we lost. We didn't launch our first satellite until the following year, which is a very big deal. We were behind. And when it comes to being the first into outer space, 3 months is way behind. So I'm going to ask you, why do you think I'm saying this was an amazing event for America? How would America benefit from the Russians kicking our tail being first into outer space? Our nation all at once realized that we were not teaching our next generation effectively. The very next day after Russia launched this satellite in outer space, we held a national press conference to highlight the gross deficiencies in our education system. Soviet satellite has shattered the nation's smug complacency about its schools and colleges. And another one, nothing is more important than a trained and educated mind. Before the 1-year anniversary, within 1 year, Congress passed the National Defense Education Act, which was a 4-year program to infuse $1 billion into the education system to completely turn it around in America. $1 billion in 1958 is a big deal. Sputnik forced us to put a new priority on the way that we taught. What we had been doing wasn't enough. It was good. It got us within 3 or 4 months, right? But it wasn't enough. So, what was the old way that we were teaching our kids in college and high school and middle school? It is known as didactic teaching. The prominent element of didactic teaching requires the teacher to give instruction to the students while the students are passive listeners. And the teachers simply required rote memorization of whatever content was provided, and the knowledge of the teacher was never questioned. Even in science lab, which is where we were trying to raise up these scientists to get into, the space race and win, all of the experiments were cookbook, step-by-step procedures. Do it just like this, and the students following it would get the exact same results that everyone year before year before year before year got. As a result, we did very little to enhance the critical thinking skills of our students. As a result, then, America was not the technology leader in the 50s and 60s. So, I am not saying didactic is all bad. It does have a place in teaching, and this ridiculous equation on the board is an example of that. When you have super complex information, there better be didactics because someone is not going to, analytically come up with that answer. The students aren't, right? So sometimes it's required, especially if someone is not yet quite organized in a new learning forum. Didactics works very well. Today, people that work in the education system, when they hear the word didactic, do you know what they associate it with? Take a guess. Who said preaching? Direct hit. Global educators, when they hear didactic teaching, they think religious preaching. The shift in America's learning as a result of the Sputnik crisis was about moving away from teaching only facts and memorization and moving toward teaching analytical and problem-solving skills. All global educators agree, today it's proven with science over and over again, that didactic teaching, believe it or not, impedes the development of critical thinking skills. It keeps us from it. So where do you think didactic teaching began? And how did it take such a hold in our education system? I'm just going to tell you. It started with early in human history. A tribe watched how the tribal leaders and elders did it, and they had to mimic it exactly how they did it in order for the tribe to survive. The tribes that didn't do it well did not survive. They died off. And this was kind of how they protected their culture and history and their survival skills through this form of didactic teaching. Didactics became a process of protecting knowledge for survival and preservation of history. By the time we see Jesus teaching in the New Testament, we know he was teaching crowds of people, almost like an early outdoor lecture hall. Hey, pull up a stone, hear what I have to say. What's amazing to consider is that before Jesus left, he called us as his disciples to do the same. He called his chosen to teach others how to live for him. We know the famous verse, right? Teach them to obey, right? 28:18 through 20. Therefore, go make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. That word teaching there in the Greek, anyone care to guess what that Greek word is? Didasko. So this is where we got this word from. We eventually took our understanding of the way that Jesus was teaching, sitting in front of a bunch of people, lecturing to them, and carried it forward into our school system. Even though a mountain of evidence exists that didactic teaching hinders the development of analytical thinking skills, even to this day, even with what happened in 1958, didactic teaching is in our school systems. How many of you in college sat and listened to a lecturer lecture without an interruption? Raise your hand, please, if you did. How many of you wanted to strangle the lecturer? Please raise your hand. Oh, we have people raising both hands. Perfect. I bet you looked like this. I bet you did. It can be incredibly tedious for students to just listen to lectures. There's very minimal interaction, right, between them and the teacher. Even when we sit in church, listening, it can be really hard to stay awake. One of the blessings behind taking my glasses off is I get to turn off this automatic function in me that I cannot control. I count people nodding off when I speak. I can't turn it off. Now I have my glasses off. I don't even see if you're nodding off. So please, enjoy your nap. And if you are napping, you're not even hearing what I'm saying. So, now by the way, people that nod off in church, righteous, spiritual, loving, amazing disciples of Christ. This is not a dig on them. So I have a question for you. Did Jesus intend for us to teach this way, like lecturers in front of a group of adoring listeners? What do you think? I love that you don't even have an answer. No guesses, nothing, okay? There's no wrong answer here. Okay? Sometimes that's wrong. What? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I can't even see the expression on your face, so can you guys take a look? If he looks angry, can someone walk me out to my car later tonight? Okay. We can answer that question, which kind of, I think I got a lot of silence, really. A couple of you wanted to take a guess at it. But we can answer that question by investigating how Jesus taught his disciples, not the crowds. This is critical. Remember, when he called his first disciples, he promised them that he would make them fishers of men. He did not say, come with me and I'm going to make all those crowds that are going to listen to me fishers of men. It was reserved just for those who gave up their life to follow Christ. How did Jesus teach them? I'm asking you. Engagement? What? One-on-one? Example? Questions? Questions? Parables? Okay. Jesus asked a lot of questions. Do you know how many questions, individual, unique questions Jesus asked in the four Gospels? A lot is the correct answer, yes. Before I tell you the answer, this is so often overlooked within our fellowship of churches, nothing against us, I mean, it's just the way it is, to see how Jesus taught his followers by asking questions. He asked questions to them, to other people in front of them, and when people asked him questions, what did he do? Ask them a question right back. Who do you say I am? Who is my neighbor? If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to his life? These are 4 of 117 questions Jesus asked. Am I saying that Jesus never used didactic teaching? No. We know that he did. In fact, we see him on occasion in small groups talking, which, by the way, we don't have an example of Jesus discipling just one person one-on-one. Even when he was talking to Peter, which everyone's like, oh yeah, he discipled Peter, get behind me, Satan. After Jesus said, get behind me, Satan, what's the next thing that it says? He turned to the other disciples and said, they were all listening to him body slam Peter. Jesus' teaching style, however, did not require rote memorization and never asked for passive listening. To make them fishers of men would take a deeper learning style than just a lecture. Of course, we know this idea of discipling comes from Jesus. When we connect with small groups of people, right, we're really doing what he did. So we're doing it at some level, of course. But what's interesting to note is whether Jesus was teaching a huge group or a little small group, he always let people interrupt him right in the middle of what he was saying. That's a pretty cool little thing to note. Imagine the humility of Jesus. People tried to trip him up right in front of everybody else all the time. Imagine how that might go down on a Sunday morning here. When someone stands up and says, God, I'm gonna blah, blah, and starts trying to trip him up. Imagine how that would be. Think about that. I'm actually teaching this Sunday, so please don't do that. That is how Jesus taught, however. He let people interact with him constantly, all the time. And what's even more interesting, most of the time, when he was asked a question in the middle of a sermon, and he asked another question of them, was Jesus looking for an answer? How many say yes? That Jesus was looking for an answer? How many say no? Jesus was not looking for an answer? How many didn't raise their hand for either question? What question did Jesus ask, or let me say it this way, what question could Jesus ask that he didn't already know the answer to? 0. Okay, let me clarify that. 0. For his disciples to really learn how to become fishers of men, he had to ask them questions and not just tell them answers. Jesus was the answer, right? So he's asking questions to get people to come back to him, ultimately. That's why he knew all the answers. We see a hint of this profound insight of Jesus asking questions way back in Proverbs chapter 20, verse 5. For most people in the ministry or in leadership, you probably know this one very well. You've probably been taught this to use in your own discipling time. The purpose in a man or woman's heart is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out. Who has ever been kind of taught that as a way to disciple others? Okay, most of you. That word understanding right there in the original Hebrew is talvun. And it means a person of intelligence and skill. The Strong's definition, which is kind of the authority on all the definitions of the Bible, includes in the definition the phrase teacher personified. So a man or woman of understanding is a teacher personified with intellect and skill. It takes skill to draw out the purposes of a man or a woman's heart. And I believe this is the foundational element of what it means to be a fisher of men. This is it. We in this room are called to draw out those fish that are swimming around in the deep waters of someone's heart. It would have been really easy for Jesus to give them the answers, but he would have robbed them of the importance of developing what? Analytical thinking skills. Just telling an answer deadens analytical thinking skills. When we give answers to those people that we are discipling, if we're honest with ourselves, really most of the time, we're just giving our opinion. Would you agree with me? I mean, we think it's God's holy word, but it's our opinion. What we may not have noticed, and I'm asking you to start trying to notice this now, when we do that, when we just give our opinion, tell an answer without asking a question, if they don't really grasp our answer, they will shut down just a little bit. Or, depending upon our intensity, they might even shut down a lot because we are deadening their analytical skills. We are throwing them into chaos because their brain is not our brain. They process information differently. To be an effective fisher of men and women, to teach others to obey, to fulfill our great commission, it's important for all of us to learn the skill of how to ask the right question at the right time. Asking shallow questions will usually only get us up to the fish that swim around toward the surface. They're colorful, they're pretty, but they're not very deep. It's important to get the people that we're discipling away from the shallow end and out into deep water. We're the ones that can do that, to ask them questions skillfully, to get those really big fish that are swimming around inside their heart. Their purpose, their porpoise. Okay, that was horrible. And I will promise you, they probably don't even know it's there. Like landing a big game fish. Who's ever seen, even if it's watching a video, someone landing a huge marlin? Who's ever seen that on TV or watching a video? That takes a lot of skill. A lot. For all of you to bring the best, are you raising your hand? No. To bring the best out of someone else, it's going to take the same type of intense training and skill for you. Asking questions instead of telling answers is a teaching technique known as what? What is that teaching technique when we ask questions? Yes. It is a Socratic method. We're going to get to that in just a second. That's another way to look at it, but you're right on the money. It's known as inquiry-based learning, okay? Inquiry-based learning. And it's, by the way, inquiry-based learning is not about getting to the right answer. What's it about? Asking the right question. That is what we are here for. Jesus asked some of the most profound questions that have ever been, ever. We have them written for us. Inquiry-based learning emphasizes the nurturing of inquiring habits of the mind. So we're kind of nurturing them to question things more, to question themselves more. It's a mental habit that strengthens disciples to continue their quest for the truth, whether you're around or not. If Jesus sat down while he was walking the earth for 3 years and made them sit in rows and have them memorize Old Testament passages, we probably would not be here right now. I don't even know what the United States would be. It might be Germany, probably. I don't know. But Jesus shared this, questions instead of answers, by his own example. And he also quoted it in Matthew 7, one of my all-time favorite passages because it's so deep But Jesus said, ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open. For whoever asks receives, etc. When we learn as people discipling other people how to ask questions instead of just telling answers, they will learn to create questions on their own. It is just the way the brain works. They can't turn that off, as a matter of fact. They can't unhear your questions. You ask them a question and it's, poised correctly, it will haunt them. Not that you're trying to haunt people. Okay, maybe you are, but maybe we don't want to be, right? By consistently making a commitment, which I'm asking you to consider doing. I'm not asking you to make the commitment now. I'm asking you to consider making a commitment of always using inquiry-based learning like Jesus did. We will help them become seekers of the truth as a defining part of their journey. Jesus had to get them prepared before he left, and he had 3 years to do it. So what method did he use to get them prepared in just 3 years? Inquiry-based learning. I think I've known for a long time that asking questions was the right thing. I've been around since 1991 in the church. Even as a young Christian, I always kind of stood in awe of those very small handful of people that could really ask amazing questions. There are probably some of those right here in this group. I kind of stood in awe of them. But it wasn't until I trained as a professional coach that I realized, oh, this is a process that I can learn and then teach to other people. It is, and it's called the Socratic Method. Now, I came to understand the power of questioning only one way. What do you think that one way is that I came to understand how powerful it is to ask questions? By asking lots of questions. And let me tell you, it's awkward. And I forget. In fact, when I went through the coach training, one thing they taught us to do to always remember to ask questions is put your watch on your other wrist. So when you go to look at the time, now I know everyone just pulls their phone out, but you can think of something else to remind you. But every time I went to look at my watch, oh yeah, ask questions instead of telling answers. The reason why this is so important and powerful is because we will understand, value, and apply what we discover ourselves infinitely better than what we're told. Didactics has a place, but the truth about having a paradigm shift is when we kind of discovered ourselves. I am doing a lot of didactic teaching now, obviously. I'm introducing something that maybe you've not ever thought of before. It might be a little complex. We're going to do some exercises here a little bit. Thank you for the copies, whoever did those. But we see this truth in Romans 12 too. You guys know this verse, right? Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. What's the word transformed in the Greek? Anyone know? Metamorpho. It's where we get the word metamorphosis from. What's the Greek word for renewing? Anakinosis. We don't have an American word for it, but it means by changing. So become a different person completely by changing the way that you think. We can help people change the way that they think. How? Asking questions. You all pass. Isn't this our goal of discipling? To help people understand their purpose? It said in Proverbs 20, verse 5, but Jesus said in Matthew 17 or Matthew 18, teach them to obey. Didasco. That was misinterpreted. Didasco is asking questions, being an example. In a study conducted by the Searle Center for Teaching Excellence at Northwestern University, 60 college professors across the U.S. were observed for a long period of time to determine what they did to keep consistently spitting out these amazing students that went on to change the community and change the world. It's a small handful of teachers that keep doing this. And they wanted to understand what it was. The number one commonality of these great teachers was what, do you think? They actually did it with an even more precise way. They would start their class asking one very provocative question and then refuse to answer it. All of them did this. It was this massive epiphany. If you type in what makes great teachers great into Google, you can read this study. It's only like 15 or so pages. I recommend it. Jesus was a great what? Teacher. Did they call him preacher or discipler? They called him rabbi, right? It means teacher. Learning to ask great questions, I'm telling you right now, is a journey. It is not something you can just pull a lever and then all of a sudden tomorrow you're asking all these amazing questions. It doesn't work like that. As you practice, though, you will get amazing at it. Like, learning how to deep sea fish, right? This is what it means for us. I'm asking you to consider, in my opinion, that this is part of what it means to walk as Jesus walked. 1 John 2:3-6. Whoever says, I know him, but doesn't do what he commands is a liar, and the truth is not in him. The one who walks as Jesus walked is the one who is saved. Part of walking as Jesus walked is teaching like Jesus taught. And he taught by asking questions.
Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for 2 new videos each week. Tell me in the comments below about your career situation, and I'll make a video for you with a shout out. You can also become a member at Motivationeer.com. Your career is not just a way to make a living, it's a way to transform the world.